Okay, so we're gonna dive into a story that starts with something you've probably heard of, something pretty terrifying, Russian roulette. But hold on, because it takes this wild, unexpected turn. This isn't really about the guy at the end of his rope. It's about the moment the gun in his hand, well, it becomes the star of the show.
And right there, that's the big idea that just flips the whole thing on its head. The source material we're looking at actually argues the real tragedy here belongs to the gun. I know, sounds crazy, right? How can a hunk of metal have a tragedy? Well, to even begin to get our heads around that, we've got to first look at the man holding it.
So yeah, to really get the gun's story, we need to meet the man. And he is at his absolute lowest point. His desperation is what kicks this whole thing off.
So this guy, he's described as a human zombie, just completely numb, so disconnected from his own life that the only way he can feel anything is through pain. And that's what leads him to Russian roulette. He puts one single bullet in the chamber, 1 in 6 chance. It's the ultimate act of desperation.
And what's going on in his head is so important here. It's not just that he wants to die. He's mad at himself because he can't even seem to do that right. He feels like he has zero control, not even over his own death. And it's right there, in that exact moment of weakness, that everything changes.
Yep, this is where the story just veers off into the Twilight Zone, you know? It gets fantastic. Because the gun, this piece of metal in his hand, it starts to talk.
And the first thing the gun says? It's not a threat. It's a plea for its own life. It basically says, hey, by picking me for this huge life or death moment, you gave me life. You made me conscious. For the very first time, this gun feels like it can make a choice, and man, it really, really wants that chance.
So this is the main event. It's a battle for existence. It's not the guy against himself anymore. Now it's a full-on philosophical debate between a man who's ready to die and a gun that's desperate to live.
The man, of course, claps back with a pretty classic argument, right? It's all about ownership. He's like, you're a tool. You're my tool. I can do what I want with you. In his mind, he started this, so he gets to end it.
Oof, but the gun's comeback is just brutal. It goes right for the throat, calls him a coward, says he never really lived his life anyway. And then it completely reframes the situation. It says, I'm not here to kill you, I'm your only hope for getting your life back on track.
So you've got these two wills just totally locked in a struggle. The guy's saying, it's my life, I own it, and he wants the right to die. The gun's saying, I'm your only hope, and it wants the right to exist. It's just a totally wild standoff.
Okay, so there's a name for what's happening here. The literary trick is called anthropomorphism. It's just a fancy word for giving human traits, like talking, to something that isn't human. And once you see that, you can see how the story is using this really unusual character, the gun, to explore some pretty deep ideas about what it means to be alive.
So, how does this fight end? Well, you might expect it to end with a bang, but it doesn't. Instead, it takes another turn towards this really strange but kind of profound agreement, a pact for immortality. They realize they can find common ground, not in living or dying, but in leaving a legacy.
It's the gun that comes up with the solution. It says, look, instead of this just being some forgotten tragedy, what if we turn it into something that lasts forever? Like a story, a memory. It's basically saying their struggle could become immortal if they play their cards right.
And the deal they strike is just fascinating. Because everybody wins, in a way. The man gets a story told, so he kind of gets to live forever. And the gun, well, in what might be its one and only moment of being alive, it gets to make its one and only decision, its way. And that brings us all the way back to that first mind-bending idea. The whole point of the story. Why on earth is this the gun's tragedy and not the man's?
Okay, get this. Here's the gun's big problem. It's the only one who knows where the bullet is. So, if it fires the bullet, it does its job, right? It fulfills its purpose as a gun. But then, poof, its consciousness is gone. It just goes back to being a normal, everyday object. Its life as a character is over. But if it convinces the man not to shoot, it gets to keep on existing as this important thinking companion.
And that's the final twist, isn't it? It's a total power flip. The whole time the man thinks he's in control, that he's using the gun. But really, the gun is using him, using his crisis, to have its own moment in the sun, to be something more than just an object.
And that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it?
By flipping the perspective so completely, this story makes you rethink what a protagonist even is. I mean, if a gun can be the hero of its own tragedy, who or what else can be the center of a story? What other stories are out there that we're completely missing because we're only looking at the people involved? It really makes you wonder where the real story is, you know?